Hey guys, welcome back to the Sleepy Science. Tonight something curious slips into the space between your thoughts, not a question, not an answer, but a pause, a gentle hush that rests on your chest like mist. You don't quite notice it at first, not with your ears, but with your breathing. It deepens, slows. You're not falling asleep just yet, but you are stepping away from the noise. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it over there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lie back, and the familiar weight of your body settles into something softer than memory. The room becomes a quiet echo chamber, not hollow, just calm, a sanctuary wrapped in fabric and low lamplight. Your senses begin to retreat, but your awareness expands. And there, right there, in the hush before dreaming, a strange idea begins to bloom. What if silence isn't the absence of intelligence, but its highest form? Not stupidity, not ignorance, but a deliberate, cultivated kind of quiet. A wisdom that speaks by not speaking. Your eyes flutter closed, but the thought remains. You drift sideways, not into space, not into time, but into stillness. A place where thoughts don't shout over one another, but take turns, bowing politely. It feels like a library built in the sky. And in the corner of that cosmic reading room, someone, something is waiting. Not watching, not judging, just listening. You inhale slowly. The air feels different now, as though it carries fewer demands, as though the world has lowered its voice just for you. Silence, you begin to notice, has a shape. It's not a void, it's not empty, and it's textured. It curls around the edges of words. It catches falling thoughts like snow. It is where everything begins, and maybe where it returns. You think about your day, how full it was, not of meaning necessarily, but of noise, messages, alarms, opinions. You're always on, aren't you? Even when you're alone, your mind runs podcasts, imaginary arguments, to-do lists, self-corrections, combos. Even your silence has been colonized. But now, tonight, that silence is yours again. You feel the difference between mute and quiet. Mute is forced, quiet is chosen. Quiet is a doorway, and you're stepping through it now. Somewhere far beyond the atmosphere and headlines, a cluster of stars spins slowly, unimpressed by all our noise. And one of those stars has watched 1,000 civilizations rise and fall, never saying a word, and yet in its silence it remembers everything. You wonder, what if the smartest beings in the universe never left their planet? What if they never invented Wi-Fi or language or rockets because they realized they didn't need to? What if after evolving past war and worry, they simply stopped? Stopped racing, stopped producing, stopped explaining it, and simply began listening. To each other, to the wind, to the thoughts between thoughts. You imagine one now, not humanoid, not familiar, just presence. Like a glowing pebble on the edge of time. It hums, not loudly, but like a bowl of warm soup for the soul. It communicates without speaking, and yet you understand. Why so loud, it seems to ask. And you don't know how to answer, because maybe all our noise isn't proof of progress. Maybe it's proof we haven't figured out how to be with it ourselves yet. You shift your weight, and the sheets whisper against your skin, a tiny hush, a reminder. Silence has been here all along. It's been trying to teach you things, like how the brain rewires itself best during quiet reflection. How deep sleep only comes when the world stops knocking. How children left to a silent forest will start imagining entire worlds between the trees. You smile, because you were once one of them. Remember that? Lying in the grass, hearing nothing but wind, and somehow in that nothing was everything. Now you wonder if that's what real intelligence is, not knowing more, but needing less. You think of the monks in the Himalayas who spend decades in silence, not as punishment, but as practice. How their brains, when scanned, show patterns so peaceful it makes neurologists weep a little inside. You think of whales, how they can sing across oceans, but only do it when the water is quiet enough to carry the message. You think of the Arctic at midnight, of an owl blinking in snow, of your grandmother turning off the TV, not to sleep, but just to be. All of it, wisdom without noise. And then, a quirky fact bubbles up from memory. There's a room in Minnesota called the anechoic chamber. It's the quietest place on earth. No echo, no sound, just silence. So pure it drives most people mad after 30 minutes. Because maybe we've forgotten how to be alone with our own thoughts. Maybe we've mistaken stillness for emptiness. But what if stillness is full of truth we can only hear when everything else goes still? You exhale, deep, heavy, grateful, and in that exhale you realize something beautiful. Silence is not the opposite of intelligence. It is the maturity of it. It is what intelligence becomes when it no longer needs to prove itself. You picture the future. Not the one with neon cities and flying cars, but the one with gardens, with libraries, with porches where old friends sit without speaking because everything that needed to be said already lives between them. You imagine a planet far from here. Its surface is calm. Its people, if they are people, do not debate or persuade. They sit, they breathe, they feel, and they have names for things we don't. Words like the space between songs or the comfort of not knowing. And maybe they look at Earth and think, they're still learning to hush. You chuckle softly. Maybe you are. And isn't that okay? Isn't it okay to learn slowly? To grow into silence? A tiny sound startles you, a creak from the floor, or maybe the house settling into its own dreams. And you realize, even the silence here is alive. It stretches, breathes, listens, just like you. And in that awareness, the final thought of the night rises like a feather caught on a breeze. What if the future doesn't belong to the smartest, but to the quietest, the ones who stop, who soften, who sit by the fire with stars in their eyes and say nothing because they're too busy feeling everything. Your breathing evens out. The story is still being told, but you are no longer chasing it. You're in it, held gently by the hush that has no name. And if intelligence built the ship, maybe silence is how it sails. Sleep comes easy now, not because your questions have been answered, but because they no longer need to be. The silence deepens is not the silence of absence, but of presence, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand your attention but welcomes it. You lie there, your body gently nested in the warmth of blankets, and you begin to notice how loud your own thoughts used to be. Not anymore. Tonight, they don't need to shout. They can whisper. They can linger. They can drift like smoke through the soft-lit cathedral of your resting mind. And in that stillness, another idea begins to form, soft but shimmering. If silence is a form of wisdom, could the universe itself be wise? You let that thought rise, turning slowly like a mobile above a baby's crib. Spinning, quietly glowing, the universe doesn't speak, not in words, not in commands, it simply is, and yet it teaches. Through stars that collapse when they've done enough, through planets that spin without asking to be seen, through black holes that say nothing and in that nothing hold everything. Maybe we've been listening for the wrong kind of intelligence all along. Not the shouting kind, not the kind that builds towers or breaks them down, but the kind that knows when to do neither. You float lightly now through a memory. You were young, maybe 6, maybe 7, lying in the backseat of a car during a long night drive. The windows fogged slightly, the hum of the tyres hypnotic. The adults were talking softly in the front seat, and for just a few moments you weren't a child or a student or a dreamer. You were a listener. That kind of listening, the kind with no goal, no argument, no edge, is where real understanding begins. Maybe that's what silence is, not the absence of sound, but the presence of attention. You feel that attention now, from the sky, from the stars, from the deeper parts of yourself you forgot how to access. And it makes you think, maybe that's why we fear silence, because it brings us face to face with everything we buried beneath the noise, the regrets, the griefs, the truths we couldn't admit when the world was too loud to hear them. But silence doesn't judge, it welcomes. It wraps you in acceptance like a warm shawl and says, you don't need to fix it, just sit with it. And so you do. You lie there, not doing, not solving, not changing, just breathing, just being. In a world obsessed with intelligence, IQ tests, college degrees, life hacks, it's easy to forget the simplest truth. Peace is smarter than panic. You remember reading once that trees communicate underground through fungal networks. No Wi-Fi, no language, just the slow pulse of nutrients, warnings, whispers of weather. It's called the Wood Wide Web, and it's entirely silent. But that doesn't make it less brilliant. It might make it more so. Because sometimes the most intelligent systems aren't the ones that announce themselves. They're the ones that sustain, that endure, that adapt, not through domination, but through balance. You picture a future now, not the kind in movies with chrome cities and robot uprisings, but a quieter one. A future where cities are quieter too. Where your phone learns when to stop buzzing. Where people pause between replies. Where children are taught how to listen before they learn how to speak. And maybe, just maybe, where we start asking better questions. Not what can we build next, but what do we actually need? Not how do we get more, but what can we let go of? And you smile at the thought. Because even though it feels far away, the seeds of that future are already here, planted in your breath, watered by stillness, growing quietly in the soil of your slowing heartbeat. And then a memory surfaces, strange, almost forgotten. A time you sat by a window during a rainstorm. You had no place to be, no thoughts screaming for attention, just the tap-tap of water against glass, and the warm hush of a house that didn't ask you for anything. That moment, that was intelligence too. The intelligence of presence, of rest, of knowing that not every second has to be used. Because silence is use. It restores, it repairs, it reconnects. You turn slightly in bed, the pillow cool against your cheek, the room a soft cocoon of gentle dark. Your mind drifts toward the stars again. You imagine alien civilizations, not shouting across galaxies with lasers and flags, but sitting quietly by their oceans, watching, wondering, perhaps meditating in rings of magnetized air, perhaps dreaming, and perhaps wondering about you. Maybe the silence between stars isn't empty space, but mutual contemplation, an agreement, unspoken, that until we're ready to approach each other with humility, we stay apart. Not because we hate, but because we respect. You chuckle softly, eyes closed now. It's funny, isn't it? How much effort humans spend proving they're intelligent. Always building, always explaining, always trying to be the loudest voice in the room. But what if the most evolved species don't shout at all? What if they wait? Watch, whisper, or say nothing, because nothing is the only language subtle enough for true wisdom. You drift deeper. The air around you grows thicker, not heavy but meaningful, like it's been waiting for you to stop running so it could catch up. And in this stillness, even your heartbeat seems more thoughtful. There's no rush, no destination, only presence. You remember another tiny fact. When astronauts return from space, many report the overview effect, a cognitive shift where they realize how fragile, how quiet, how interconnected everything really is. They stop seeing borders, stop seeing enemies. They weep, not from fear but from perspective. And maybe, just maybe, that's what silence gives us too. Perspective. The kind we can't hear when we're drowning in our own voices. You smile again. Sleepy now, warm, because even though the story isn't over, you already understand something deeper than before. Intelligence isn't always knowing. Sometimes it's just listening long enough for wisdom to arrive. And if that takes time, if it takes silence, then so be it. You're here for it. You're ready. And silence is still speaking. Silence has a strange way of softening time. You notice it now, the way each second stretches, unfolding like a ribbon on still water. Your body has surrendered to rest, but your awareness is still gently present, like a candle barely flickering in a quiet room. Somewhere deep within you, a thought pulses like a low hum. What if the smartest choice a mind can make is not to act? You let the question settle, not rushing toward an answer. Tonight is not for answers. Tonight is for drifting through the space between them. And as you drift, your mind paints a scene, a vast desert, not empty but ancient. The air is warm with memory. The sand shifts like breathing silk. In the distance, a single figure sits cross-legged, not human, not alien, just aware. It doesn't move, it doesn't speak, it simply is. You understand somehow that this being has lived for a very long time. It has watched stars form and vanish. It has listened to civilizations rise in cacophony and collapse in echo. And it has chosen stillness, because the wisdom it holds cannot be shouted, it can only be absorbed. You feel a breeze pass through your thoughts, carrying fragments of an old idea. Do nothing and nothing is left undone. You heard that once, a whisper from a Taoist text maybe. It confused you then, but it makes sense now, because doing nothing isn't laziness, it's listening and it's allowing. It's the deep intelligence of letting life unfold without interference. The ancient figure vanishes, but the idea lingers, not as knowledge, but as presence. You exhale, let go, and float further into the quiet. Now you're underwater, but not in any sea you know. The liquid here is more like light, and you move through it not with effort, but with thought. Above you, jellyfish bloom like galaxies. Their tendrils flicker softly, sharing pulses of colour, of emotion. They aren't communicating to explain, they're communicating to feel, to resonate. They are silent, but deeply attuned. It hits you suddenly. Maybe intelligence isn't output, but alignment. Not how loudly you speak, but how well you hear. Not how much you know, but how fully you notice. And maybe the wisest beings in the universe aren't the ones who conquered it, but the ones who merge with it. Not because they lost themselves, but because they listened themselves open. You think of whales now, blue giants humming lullabies into oceans older than language. Their songs stretch across miles, sometimes hours. No rush, no audience, just the deep, slow pulse of a species that has always known something we're still trying to remember. You lie a little deeper, and you remember a night, long ago, when you walked into a forest at dusk. Alone, but not lonely. The trees didn't speak, the moss didn't teach, but everything felt intelligent. Not in the human way, in the earth way. Rooted, present, humble. You realise that maybe we confuse intelligence with expression because we're so desperate to be seen. But the smartest beings, they don't need to be seen. They need only to see, and so you look inward. Not because the answers are there, but because the silence is. And in that silence you find a forgotten door. You open it, and step into a space that doesn't exist in any geography. A monastery maybe, but made of starlight and memory. The walls flicker with moments from your life, not the loud ones, but the quiet ones. A hand held, a pause between sentences, the space between heartbeats when you realised you were in love. None of them required intelligence, but all of them required presence. You walk slowly, barefoot. The floor hums with a vibration you recognise, not sound, but recognition. And then you reach a room with no walls, no ceiling, just sky. Above, the constellations aren't stars, they are moments of silence, stitched together across time. You lie down and let them wrap around you, and for the first time you feel something subtle but profound. Silence isn't just smarter, it's kinder, because it gives space and it gives permission. It says, you don't have to perform, just be. You breathe that in like air, and your heartbeat slows again, not from exhaustion, but from alignment. You think of octopuses now, strange ancient minds that solve puzzles and mimic patterns, but don't cling to hierarchy. They change colours, not to declare, but to reflect. They are solitary, but not disconnected. And scientists are still baffled by how such intelligence emerged in such a different body. But maybe that's the point. Intelligence isn't a shape, it's a sensitivity, a stillness. You are still now, you're becoming that stillness. And then you remember another idea, tucked somewhere in a dusty corner of your bookshelf. In some Native American traditions, the wisest people in the tribe weren't the ones who spoke first. They were the ones who waited the longest before answering. Because they knew that silence wasn't empty, it was full of truth, not yet spoken. You wonder now how different our world might be if we honoured those who waited, if we rewarded the pause, if we celebrated the quiet. What if, instead of asking how fast someone can think, we asked how deeply they can listen? What if our schools taught contemplation? What if our cities had quiet hours, not as punishment, but as healing? You drift through those possibilities, and in the distance you see a planet, not futuristic and not ruined, just peaceful. Its people don't race, its skies are calm, and its machines know when to sleep. And maybe that's the most advanced thing of all, knowing when to stop, knowing when to be silent, knowing that wisdom doesn't always need to prove itself, and you feel it now in your bones, in the soft corners of your eyes, in the hush between your inhales. Silence is teaching you, not with answers, but with permission to rest, to soften and to be. And tonight that is enough. Silence has a strange way of softening time. You notice it now, the way each second stretches, unfolding like a ribbon on still water. Your body has surrendered to rest, but your awareness is still gently present, like a candle barely flickering in a quiet room. Somewhere deep within you, a thought pulses like a low hum. What if the smartest choice a mind can make is not to act? You let the question settle, not rushing toward an answer. Tonight is not for answers. Tonight is for drifting through the space between them. And as you drift, your mind paints a scene, a vast desert, not empty but ancient. The air is warm with memory. The sand shifts like breathing silk. In the distance, a single figure sits cross-legged, not human, not alien, just aware. It doesn't move, it doesn't speak, and it simply is. You understand somehow that this being has lived for a very long time. It has watched stars form and vanish. It has listened to civilizations rise in cacophony and collapse in echo. And it has chosen stillness, because the wisdom it holds cannot be shouted, it can only be absorbed. You feel a breeze pass through your thoughts, carrying fragments of an old idea. Do nothing, and nothing is left undone. You heard that once, a whisper from a Taoist text, maybe. It confused you then, but it makes sense now. Because doing nothing isn't laziness, it's listening. It's allowing. It's the deep intelligence of letting life unfold without interference. The ancient figure vanishes, but the idea lingers. Not as knowledge, but as presence. You exhale, let go, and float further into the quiet. Now you're underwater, but not in any sea you know. The liquid here is more like light, and you move through it not with effort, but with thought. Above you, jellyfish bloom like galaxies. Their tendrils flicker softly, sharing pulses of colour, of emotion. They aren't communicating to explain, they're communicating to feel, to resonate. They are tuned, but deeply attuned. It hits you, suddenly. Maybe intelligence is an output, but alignment. Not how loudly you speak, but how well you hear. Not how much you know, but how fully you notice. And maybe the wisest beings in the universe aren't the ones who conquered it, but the ones who merged with it. Not because they lost themselves, but because they listened themselves open. You think of whales now, blue giants humming lullabies into oceans older than language. Their songs stretch across miles, sometimes hours. No rush, no audience. Just the deep, slow pulse of a species that has always known something we're still trying to remember. You lie a little deeper, and you remember a night, long ago, when you walked into a forest at dusk, alone but not lonely. The trees didn't speak, the moss didn't teach, but everything felt intelligent, not in the human way, in the earth way, rooted, present, humble. You realize that maybe we confuse intelligence with expression because we're so desperate to be seen. But the smartest beings, they don't need to be seen, they need only to see. And so you look inward, not because the answers are there, but because the silence is. And in that silence you find a forgotten door. You open it, and step into a space that doesn't exist in any geography. A monastery maybe, but made of starlight and memory. The walls flicker with moments from your life, not the loud ones, but the quiet ones. A hand held, a pause between sentences, the space between heartbeats when you realized you were in love. None of them required intelligence, but all of them required presence. You walk slowly barefoot. The floor hums with a vibration you recognize, not sound, but recognition. And then you reach a room with no walls, no ceiling, just sky. Above, the constellations aren't stars, they're moments of infinity and stitched together across time. You lie down and let them wrap around you, and for the first time you feel something subtle but profound. Silence isn't just smarter, it's kinder. Because it gives space, it gives permission. It says, you don't have to perform, just be. You breathe that in like air, and your heartbeat slows again, not from exhaustion, but from alignment. You think of octopuses now, strange ancient minds that solve puzzles and mimic patterns, but don't cling to hierarchy. They change colours, not to declare, but to reflect. They are solitary, but not disconnected. And scientists are still baffled by how such intelligence emerged in such a different body. But maybe that's the point. Intelligence isn't a shape. It's a sensitivity, a stillness. You are still now. You're becoming that stillness. And then you remember another idea, tucked somewhere in a dusty corner of your bookshelf. In some Native American traditions, the wisest people in the tribe weren't the ones who spoke first. They were the ones who waited the longest before answering. Because they knew that silence wasn't empty. It was full of truth, not yet spoken. You wonder now how different our world might be if we honoured those who waited. If we rewarded the pause. If we celebrated the quiet. What if, instead of asking how fast someone can think, we asked how deeply they can listen? What if our schools taught contemplation? What if our cities had quiet hours, not as punishment, but as healing? You drift through those possibilities, and in the distance you see a planet, not futuristic and not ruined, just peaceful. Its people don't race, its skies are calm, its machines know when to sleep. And maybe that's the most advanced thing of all, knowing when to stop, knowing when to be silent, knowing that wisdom doesn't always need to prove itself. You feel it now in your bones, in the soft corners of your eyes, in the hush between your inhales. Silence is teaching you, not with answers, but with permission to rest, to soften, to be. And tonight that is enough. You're still lying there, body softened by gravity, but your mind no longer obeys its pull. You've become light, slow, curling light drifting through the edge of night. And in that weightlessness, a question returns. Not loud, not urgent, just there like breath on glass. If silence is wiser than intelligence, then why do we keep shouting into the void? You don't answer right away, because tonight isn't about answers. Tonight is about the hush between them, the lull in your chest, the warmth of the blanket, the way your breath echoes in your ears soft and slow. You let the question dissolve like mist curling off a pond, and instead you find yourself walking barefoot across a strange and ancient place. A city, but not like any city you've known. There are no horns, no signs, no neon, only stillness. Buildings rise like fingers carved from stone, woven with vines, their edges softened by time. Wind flows between them like a whisper passing secrets from street to street. Every door is open, every room is quiet. You realize no one is talking here. And yet somehow everything is being said. Two people sit across from one another on a rooftop, not speaking, just sitting. Between them, a bowl of tea steams gently, untouched. You pause, watching, and suddenly you understand the language. Stillness is conversation. Presence is reply. Silence is shared. This city has outgrown noise, not out of disdain, but because it has learned a deeper form of connection, the kind that doesn't need translation, the kind that doesn't interrupt. And you wonder, could humanity evolve toward this? Not through technology, but through tenderness? Could we learn to pause before speaking, to listen without forming a rebuttal, to share space without needing to fill it? You continue walking. The path winds through a garden shaped like a spiral. Trees sway gently, as if bowing to unseen music. Somewhere a breeze brushes your arm like a lover's hand, reminding you that this moment, this one right now is enough, and it dawns on you. Maybe intelligence is the ability to recognize sufficiency, not wanting more, not proving more, but resting in enough. You smile, not because anything spectacular has happened, but because nothing has, and that's the miracle. You sit beneath a tree that hums, faintly, like a cello played at a distance. Its roots thrum beneath your hand, its leaves are matte, soft, velvet dark. You lean your head back and close your eyes, and into the quiet, a thought drifts in. What if all the truly intelligent species in the universe eventually go quiet? Not because they die, but because they arrive. They arrive at peace, at balance, at the understanding that not every truth needs a trumpet, that sometimes the highest wisdom is to leave the question unanswered. Because in the pause, something blooms. You think about the great silence, what scientists call the eerie absence of alien signals in the cosmos. So much skip, so many stars, so little noise, and yet here you are, bathed in silence so rich it tastes like starlight. Maybe the silence isn't absence, maybe it's choice. You shift slightly in bed. The air feels thicker now, like memory. And you remember, there was a time when humans were quieter, before screens, before schedules, before answers came faster than questions could bloom. We sat in circles, we watched fire, we listened to stories and winds and the language of birds. We were slower, yes, but maybe, just maybe, we were wiser. You drift further, not into sleep, but into imagining. A world that values quiet. A culture that teaches stillness as a subject in school, where children learn to sit in silence not as punishment but as practice, to hear the language of breath, to notice the curl of shadow beneath a leaf. You imagine diplomats trained in silence, boardrooms paused for 1 full minute before decision, hospitals with rooms not for recovery, but for rest. And in that imagining something stirs, a blueprint, not for a new city, not for a spaceship, but for a softer way of being. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps silence is not the absence of building, it's the beginning of something more beautiful. You let that unfold in you, like a song without melody, and suddenly you're not in the city anymore. You're in space, but not the dark, empty kind. This space is warm, alive. It hums with light, the colour of memory. All around you, structures bloom, organisms the size of asteroids, woven from thoughts. There are no engines, no walls, just luminous webs pulsing with colour and emotion. You realise they're not ships, they're dreams. The dreams of beings who chose stillness, who stopped shouting and started listening. And in that listening they learned how to shape silence into shelter. They live inside reverence, and you are a visitor. One of them floats toward you. Its shape is impossible, its presence is undeniable. You do not speak, it does not ask, but something passes between you. A thought, a breath, a gift. And you understand without language that it has heard your species, all your noise, all your reaching, and it offers no judgment, only this. When you're ready to listen, we will speak in silence. You inhale, exhale, and then you're back, in your room, on your bed, the ceiling soft with shadow. But something has changed. The world hasn't quieted. You have. The silence is not out there. It's in you now. You feel it under your ribs, in the bend of your elbow, and in the hush of your thoughts. You understand that silence isn't empty. It's spacious. It holds everything, gently, willingly, even you, even now. You're still lying there, not asleep, not awake, just suspended. A breath between breaths. A pause in the cosmic metronome. Around you the world feels slightly translucent, as if the veil between thought and reality has thinned. You could reach out and touch a feeling, a memory, a star. And in this velvet quiet, something soft begins to bloom inside you. Not a thought, a remembering of how often your life is filled, not with experience but with commentary, constant narration, endless interpretation. You pour your coffee and your mind speaks. You're late again. You see a mirror and it chirps, you look tired. You open your phone and the voices begin. Be more, do more, show more. Noise. Not from the world but from within. And in this moment of stillness, you realize just how loud it's all been. You exhale, a long, slow, unclenching breath, and the silence rushes in like the tide returning to shore. You picture your thoughts like birds in a room, flapping, squawking, restless. But tonight they settle, one by one, perching quietly on the windowsill of your awareness. No need to chase them away, just let them be, let you be. And in that gentle surrender, a question drifts through. When did intelligence become a performance? Was it when we started measuring everything? Grades, salaries, IQs and KPIs, as if the mind's worth could be reduced to numbers in a spreadsheet, as if wisdom had to wear a lab coat or a podium mic to be taken seriously. But the owl does not explain itself. The ocean does not present a thesis. The stars do not hold press conferences. They simply exist, and in their existence they radiate a kind of knowing that has no need to prove itself. You shift under your blanket. The warmth reminds you of something ancient, something older than language. You imagine a child sitting beneath a tree and not reading, not studying, just watching. The wind, the leaves, the way the sun makes dust sparkle in the air. That child is learning something no school can grade. And in that child you see yourself, or maybe not yourself, but the you who existed before the noise began, before expectations, before pressure, before the great exhausting game of becoming someone. You smile a little crookedly, because somewhere along the way we began to confuse intelligence with exhaustion, as if the smartest person is the busiest, the most knowledgeable is the most anxious, the most capable is the most burned out. But tonight, you begin to suspect otherwise. You begin to wonder if real intelligence might be something else entirely, something quiet, something calm and something slow. You picture a brain, your brain, not lit up like fireworks but glowing like embers, not a machine, a hearth, a place not of calculation but of warmth, of intuition, of still patient clarity. You drift a little further and now you're walking through a museum. But there are no walls, no paintings, just moments held in glass. A bird pausing mid-flight, a hand brushing a lover's back, a woman sitting on a train, her eyes closed, listening to rain. Each moment a world, each world a cathedral of silence. And you realize this is the intelligence no one applauds, the intelligence of knowing when to pause, the brilliance of letting someone finish their sentence without interrupting, the genius of not needing to win the argument, the wisdom of being the one in the room who doesn't speak because they are actually listening. You pause by a pedestal where a single teacup rests. It's cracked. Steam curls from its rim like a ghost, and the plaque beneath it reads, "This cup once held the quiet that saved a life." You don't know what it means, but you do. And you walk on, not because you've finished exploring, but because the silence is carrying you now, like a river. You drift through a forest where each tree hums a different pitch, through a city where people nod instead of speak, through a mountain that only breathes once a year, and the silence deepens, not as absence, but as presence. It begins to feel like someone is here with you, not a being, not a guide, and something larger, older, something watching, not with the eyes, but with awareness. And in that awareness, you are not being judged. You are being known, completely, without explanation. And you realize the universe may not be shouting because it already understands. It doesn't need to explain gravity every morning. It doesn't need to defend the orbit of the planets. It doesn't panic when a star dies. It trusts its rhythms. It honors its silences. Could you do the same? Could you trust the pauses in your own life? The quiet weeks. The moments when nothing seems to be happening. The hours where you feel still and the world spins on without you. Could it be that in those pauses, you're growing, not visibly, not in ways that get applause, but deeply, invisibly and essentially? You lie still again, blanket drawn up to your chin, and you think of all the noise you've absorbed today. Headlines, notifications, alarms, opinions, and you let them fall, one by one, like clothes you no longer need to wear. And beneath them, silence. Not empty, not dull, but sacred. And you begin to wonder, what if silence isn't smarter than intelligence? Because it's the opposite of it. What if it's smarter because it's the mother of it? The womb in which true thought gestates, where wisdom waits, where truth brews slowly, like tea left to steep in the dusk. You close your eyes, and in the velvet dark behind your eyelids, a wordless truth takes root. You are not the noise, you are not the striving, you are not the proving, you are the space in which all of it happens, you are the pause. And that is more than enough. The quiet doesn't leave you now. It's not a visitor anymore. It's a room you've stepped into, one without walls, without clocks, without mirrors, just breath and space and the soft hum of being. You lie in this silence like a leaf on still water, not pushed, not pulled, just floating. And something strange begins to occur. You stop thinking in language, not entirely, but enough to notice. Your mind moves more like mist than machinery now. Less sentences, more sensations, less logic, more listening. Words no longer march in lines. They ripple, dissolve, reform. You feel the shift. It's like stepping out of shoes you didn't know were too tight. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you realize something tender. Your intelligence doesn't live in your words, it lives in your awareness. You don't need to explain anything to be real. You don't need to name something to know it's sacred. This is a different kind of knowing, a knowing that hums instead of argues, a knowing that nods instead of needing to be right. You turn your head slightly on the pillow. The ceiling feels wider now, less like drywall, more like sky. Your breathing slows, not because you're trying to relax, but because there's nothing left to brace against. And in that softened place, a memory drifts through. It's not a big one, not a birthday or a crisis or a victory, it's just A quiet moment. You're standing in a kitchen at night. The window is open. The fridge hums faintly. There's a cup of tea in your hands. No one else is awake. You're not doing anything important. But in that moment you remember, you felt real. Not successful, not impressive, just real. And the memory brings a question. One so gentle it nearly melts on arrival. What if the moments that matter most are the ones no one sees? No photo, no post, no proof, just presence. You being alive. Unwitnessed, unadorned, unedited. A hush settles in your chest. Not sadness, something else. Recognition. And then another thought appears, slowly, carefully, as if it knows how tender you are right now. What if silence is what intelligence grows into? Not a detour, not a breakdown, but an evolution. You think of an elder sitting on a porch, their eyes quiet, their hands still. They've seen so much, felt so much, and now they don't need to speak unless the moment asks for it. They know the weight of words, and the mercy of withholding them. You imagine the elder is you, years from now, not jaded, not withdrawn, and just softened. And maybe that's the next step. Not knowing more, but needing less. Less noise, less debate, less reaction. You feel it in your bones now, that deep bone-warm recognition. That quiet isn't empty. It's refined. It's where the raw ore of your thoughts is smelted into insight. Where confusion settles into clarity. Not because you force it, but because you finally stop stirring the water. You picture your mind as a pond. Lately it's been agitated, ripples and splashes, all from trying to think your way out of every problem. But now, it's still. And in that stillness, the truth at the bottom begins to emerge. Not because it changed, but because you did. You sigh. And in that sigh, something leaves you. Tension, performance, the need to have it all figured out. And what rushes in to fill its place? A deep and radiant permission. Permission to rest, to not know, to not fix. Just to feel the soft animal of your body breathing under the weight of a blanket in a room lit only by starlight and sleep. And the silence wraps around you like a shawl, a silence that does not scold, does not judge, does not hurry, it simply is. And for the first time you think, maybe this is what wisdom feels like before it has words. It doesn't knock, it doesn't lecture, it waits, and in its waiting it invites you inward. Not downward, not upward, but inward, where the most meaningful truths hide, not in libraries or lectures, but in the quiet spaces of your own attention. You feel it now like a whisper through your body. You don't need more stimulation, you need more stillness, because in stillness you can finally hear your own heartbeat, and behind that, something even older, a rhythm that existed before you were born, before your name, before the world told you what to chase, a rhythm like the turning of a planet, a rhythm like the silence between stars, a rhythm like the breath of something ancient and kind. You drift again, but this time not away. You drift inward, into the deep library of your own remembering, where every quiet moment you've ever loved lives like a candle. The way snow sounded when you were 5, the hush of books in a library no one else visited, the sound of a loved one sleeping, safe beside you. These are the intelligences that never made the news, but shaped you, held you, built you, and maybe, just maybe, they're the only ones that ever really mattered. Something changes in the quiet, not suddenly, not loudly, but like dawn, softly insisting its time. You don't open your eyes, you don't move, but deep inside a shift occurs, like an old gate slowly swinging open, like a breath held for decades, finally released. And what enters through that gate isn't more thoughts. It's not more ambition or answers. It's a feeling, warm, low, ancient. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, you've misunderstood what intelligence really is. Not wrong, just incomplete. You were told intelligence was sharp, fast, dominant, the first hand up, the loudest voice in the room, the solver, the builder, the winner. But here, in the hush of almost sleep, you sense something truer. That real intelligence might not be a race. It might be a rhythm, and not how fast you can think, but how deeply you can feel. Not how much you can explain, but how gently you can observe. And in this rhythm you discover something else. That silence isn't the absence of intelligence, it's its final form. because eventually every truly intelligent being stops talking. Not because they run out of things to say, but because they've realized some truths are too whole for words. They can only be shared in presence, in stillness, in the sacred act of not interrupting the moment. You feel that truth now, not as a fact, but as a frequency, like a bell struck in the dark echoing through your chest. It doesn't ask you to do anything. It doesn't ask you to prove yourself, and it just asks, can you be still enough to hear what's always been speaking? Not through language, but through leaves, through wind, through the long pause before dawn. That's where the intelligence lives now, not in your browser tabs, not in debates, not even in the words I'm saying to you now, but beneath them, inside them, and around them. And when you quiet down enough, you find that it's been here the whole time. The intelligence of still water, of a crow's single cry, of your grandmother's silence after telling a story, of the universe expanding, unhurried, unbothered by applause. And in that moment you feel it, a thought without edges, a sentence with no punctuation. You don't have to be loud to be wise. You don't have to solve everything to be worthy. You don't have to win every argument to be respected. You can sit in silence and know and be known, not because you said it, but because you lived it. You breathe slowly now, not because you're trying to be calm, but because calm is what happens when you stop trying and just allow. Allow the quiet, allow the unsolved, allow the unknown. This is where the sacred intelligence waits, in the in-between, in the breath before a decision, in the moment just after the tears have fallen, but before the healing has begun. You remember moments like that, don't you? Sitting in your room after a loss, not needing comfort, not needing noise, just stillness. It wasn't empty, it was holy. You didn't have a name for it then. Maybe you still don't. But you knew. Somehow you knew. There are places silence can take you that words cannot follow. And that realization doesn't frighten you anymore. It frees you. Because maybe this whole time you've been trying to think your way into peace, when all you had to do was quiet down. Not forever, just long enough to hear what's underneath the noise. A heartbeat, a presence, a question whispered not in your mind but in your bones. What if you were already enough before you ever opened your mouth? The thought rocks you gently, like a wave that doesn't want to wash you away, just remind you that you float. You smile softly, eyes still closed. You don't need to understand it all tonight. You don't need a grand epiphany. All you need is what you already have, a body, a breath, and the permission to stop reaching. Because in this silence something inside you stretches, not toward the sky, but inward, toward the core, toward the place where intelligence meets tenderness, where brilliance bows its head in humility, where knowing becomes listening, where silence becomes love. You drift now, not away from the world, but deeper into it, not asleep, but deeper than sleep, into a place where the quiet is not an absence, but a language. And you are fluent, not because you studied it, but because you remembered. You were always meant to understand this, not with your brain, but with your being, because before the world taught you to talk, to calculate, to argue, you knew how to listen, you knew how to rest, you knew how to exist without needing to prove it. And now, here in the hush between breaths, you reclaim that knowing, not loudly and not triumphantly, just gently, like finding something you lost in a coat pocket and still warm from the last time you wore it. The intelligence that doesn't announce itself, but waits until you're ready to stop trying to be smart and start remembering that you are already wise. It's darker now, not in a fearful way, but in the way of velvet, of thick curtains drawn in a theatre just before the story begins, the kind of dark that doesn't hide anything, it simply holds it. And in that darkness you aren't shrinking, you're expanding, not outward, not up, but deep, because something within you has started listening, not to me, not to the stars, but to the part of yourself that never speaks and never stopped knowing, the part that watches you reach and chase and strive and waits patiently for you to sit down beside it. You're sitting there now, still wordless, barefoot in your own awareness. And from here you begin to wonder, what if intelligence isn't about knowing more, but needing less? Not answers, not attention, not explanation, just being, just presence. The kind of presence you find in ancient trees, in an animal's eyes, in the way ocean waves don't ask permission, they just keep arriving. This isn't the kind of intelligence that earns awards. It doesn't trend. It doesn't defend itself. It doesn't interrupt. It waits. And slowly, like a tide drawing back from shore, you feel your old definitions of intelligence begin to recede. It's not just what you can memorize. It's not about how fast you respond or how many books you've read. Maybe real intelligence is revealed in how deeply you can pause before you respond, how willingly you sit with not knowing, how gracefully you share space with another without filling it with your own echo. You picture a room now, minimal, soft, there's no clutter, no noise, just a chair, a window, a plant leaning toward the light. It's not empty, it's peaceful, just like your mind is becoming. You feel your thoughts slow down, not in defeat but in reverence, like guests removing their shoes before entering a temple. And in that temple, silence sits at the center, not as a void, but as a guest of honor. You begin to realize silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something sacred is, like seeds sprouting underground, like wounds closing while you sleep, like stars forming behind a curtain of cosmic dust. This is intelligence too, not visible, but vital. You breathe, and this time the air feels wiser somehow, like it's been carrying this knowing all along. Maybe this is what elders meant when they said, just be still. Not because they had nothing more to teach, but because some things can't be taught, they must be felt, understood without being explained, held without being defined, and now you are holding it, the knowing without words, the wisdom that arrives only when the noise departs, the kind of understanding that animals have, that trees have, not because they can explain it, but because they live it. You think back now to moments you've rushed, conversations where you filled the silence because it felt awkward, decisions you made too quickly just to end the discomfort of waiting. And you wonder, what if all those moments were invitations to pause, to feel, to listen, and instead of accepting them, you tried to solve them. But silence doesn't ask to be solved, it asks to be respected. You feel that respect rising in you now, not as guilt but as grace, because there's still time to learn a new kind of intelligence, time to listen longer, to speak less, to feel more, because somewhere in this hush you're remembering something older than books, older than cities, older than even human speech. That wisdom was once passed not with words, but with presence, a glance, a hand on a shoulder, a pause held between two people who love each other enough to need nothing said. That's the intelligence returning to you now, not loud, not eager, not trendy, just here, like the moon outside your window, like the heartbeat you forgot you had, like the stars, shining with no need for an audience. You imagine now a world that values this kind of intelligence, a classroom where silence isn't awkward but honored, a meeting where the wisest person is the one who listens most, a culture where stillness is seen not as laziness but as discipline, a life where you are allowed to know without proving, to exist without performance, to think deeply without having to speak quickly. You smile, because maybe the future doesn't belong to the fastest, maybe it belongs to the gentlest, to the ones who know how to pause before answering, to the ones who understand that the most important moments aren't captured, they are felt. You exhale, long and soft, and the air around you seems to lean in, as if it's listening too, because this silence, this stillness, it's not empty, it's full of meaning, of depth, of invitation, the kind that doesn't push, it pulls, and you're allowing yourself to be pulled. Into what? Not a destination, not a solution, but a space inside you that's always been there, quiet, waiting, whole, the part of you that already knows, that when the mind grows quiet enough, it becomes wise all on its own. No effort, no striving, just awareness, just wonder, just being. And for now, that's enough. No conclusions, no summary. Just you lying here, with your breath, your thoughts slowing, your body softening into this new kind of intelligence. A gentle, shimmering kind. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. Because silence, you've learned, is sometimes the most intelligent answer of all. You are lying still now. The quiet around you is not silence, it's something deeper. Like standing at the bottom of a lake where even your heartbeat sounds foreign, yet somehow it feels like home. This isn't the kind of quiet you get from turning off the TV or putting your phone on airplane mode. It's a soul quiet, the kind that happens when your inner noise starts to dissolve, when your questions soften, not because you've answered them, but because you've outgrown the need to ask. And in that softening, something strange and beautiful begins to surface. That the deepest truths might not be loud at all. That the universe might be whispering, not shouting. You feel your mind shift again. Not upward, not outward, but inward, like curling into warm sheets on a rainy morning. And in that curling, a thought unfolds. Not a sharp thought, not a pointed one. Just a soft thread of curiosity. What if intelligence is not the top of the pyramid, but the start of the spiral? What if we've misunderstood? We often treat intelligence as the finish line. Like if we can think fast enough, remember more, compute harder, then we've won. But what if intelligence is only the door? And beyond that door is wisdom. And beyond wisdom is peace. You smile, not because you're certain of this, but because it feels true. You remember the owl now, the one you saw as a child in the woods, turning its head slowly, watching. It didn't speak, it didn't move, but you felt its knowing, ancient, patient, not performing, just present. And that presence, it left an imprint that rises now, in the dark of your room as you realize, maybe the smartest beings don't build empires. Maybe they build gardens, or silence, or stillness between stars. You imagine one now, a being far away, not human, not flesh, made of something light or liquid or code, or it doesn't speak. But if it did, it wouldn't argue. It would ask questions that make you pause so long, you forget you were ever trying to answer them. You close your eyes tighter now, not to block the world, but to invite another one in. A quieter world, a wiser one. A place where intelligence isn't about how much you say, but how much you see. You see now. An alien civilization. Not in spaceships, not in steel towers, but in flowing canopies, living architecture, structures, made of memory, not metal, and in their society silence is sacred. There are temples where no sound has ever been made, not because they are empty, but because they are full. You picture a gathering, millions of them, each different, some pulsing like jellyfish, others woven from light, all are completely still. They are listening to the pulse of a dying star, to the echo of a world being born, to the subtle shift in gravitational tides across dimensions we haven't yet discovered. They do not interrupt. They do not announce their presence. They are simply with what is. And in this imagined world you see no need for leaders, no need for conquest, no need for flags or names. Because in a world built on deep silence, no one needs to be first. There is only the moment, shared, held, felt. You feel your breath deepen again, slower this time, like your lungs have learned something, and something ancient, something that doesn't come from books or screens or clever phrases, but from stillness, from the practice of not needing to be the loudest one in the room, even if the room is a galaxy. You begin to wonder now, what would happen if we made intelligence quieter? If every time someone spoke with certainty we asked them to wait? If every time we felt the urge to argue we took a breath instead? What if classrooms began not with a bell but with a moment of silence? What if boardrooms paused not to regroup but to reverence? What if our smartest ideas came not from brainstorming but from moon-watching? What if just maybe the opposite of ignorance isn't knowledge, it's presence? You remember now, the sound of your grandmother's breathing when she fell asleep in the rocking chair, the pause your dog would take before curling into your side, the feeling of an old friend sitting beside you on a silent bus ride. No need to fill the air with anything. These were forms of intelligence too. They were speaking, just not in words. And you heard them. You just didn't know that what you were hearing was wisdom. You are hearing it now. Not from me, but from inside you. It sounds like a pause, a hush, a soft letting go. Because letting go isn't failure. It's freedom. Letting go of needing to be the clever one. Letting go of needing to reply instantly. Letting go of needing to fix everything with your brain. Because maybe what the moment needs is not a fix, but a witness. Maybe wisdom is what happens when intelligence becomes humble, when it stops raising its hand and starts folding its arms across its chest to listen. You breathe again, and you don't fill the silence this time. You join it, because maybe this silence isn't just between you and the universe. Maybe this is the universe, not the stars, not the math, but this. This moment, right here. A human lying in bed, breathing, wondering, listening. You. You're part of it now, and not the noise, not the race, the quiet, the centre. The knowing that doesn't need to speak to be understood. And as your breath softens further, as your eyes grow heavier, you sense it. You're not alone. You've never been. Because silence has been waiting for you. Not to punish you, not to test you, but to meet you. And now you've arrived. No answer needed. No question remaining. Just you. And the quiet kind of intelligence that has always been smarter than anything we could ever say. You are not sure when it happens exactly, but something in you tilts. Just slightly, just enough. Like a feather catching a draft. You're still lying there, still tucked beneath the same covers, your room the same dim bowl of warmth it's always been. But your awareness has shifted. It stretches further now, quieter and softer, and you're not falling asleep, you're falling into understanding. And the understanding doesn't come with words or formulas. It comes the way twilight comes, gradual, inevitable, impossible to hold. You think again about silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper. A quiet that carries weight, that doesn't echo, it absorbs, and you begin to see how much noise you've carried. Not just audible noise, but mental clutter, expectations, judgments, the endless buzz of should and must and next. It's loud, isn't it? The world we've built, the way we live. Even our search for peace is often loud. We podcast about meditation. We build apps for stillness. We optimize our sleep. We chase serenity with such urgency it runs from us. But not tonight. Tonight you're not chasing, you're listening. And what you're hearing is the language of being. The simple, exquisite presence of now, of breath, of body, of the strange miracle of having thoughts at all. You feel it ripple through you like warm tea down your throat. A loosening, a softening. Intelligence got us here. But silence might help us stay. You picture the oldest trees, the ones with trunks so wide you can't wrap your arms around them. They've seen everything. Storms, suns, species come and go, and they've never spoken. And yet, don't they seem wise? You remember walking past one years ago and feeling as though it saw you. Not your clothes, not your name, just the shape of your being. That kind of knowing doesn't come from reading. It comes from rooting, from staying still long enough that the world grows around you. That's the kind of intelligence silence offers. Not clever, not flashy, but true, deep, earned over years of watching without reacting, of observing without owning. You wonder what kind of person you'd be if you practiced that. If, instead of trying to be heard, you tried to understand. If, instead of winning conversations, you tried to let them bloom. The idea feels both strange and obvious, like something you've always known but never said aloud. You breathe it in, let it settle behind your ribs. Let it become a part of you. The room is quieter now, not just because of the hour, but because of the shift inside you. You are less interested in the noise, more curious about what lives beneath it. You think of moments when someone you love said nothing, but it changed everything. A held hand, a shared glance, a long pause onto the phone where no one spoke. And yet everything was communicated. That's what silence does when we let it. It bridges, it heals, it honors what language often disturbs. You smile because you've been looking for this for a long time. Not just tonight, not just in this video, but in your life. In the questions you asked when you were small, in the restlessness you felt walking home from school, in the way you watched clouds and wondered what they were thinking. And now you're starting to hear the answers, not as explanations, but as invitations to slow down, to listen, to trust the hush. Your mind softens again. Thought slows into sensation. Awareness curls up beside your heartbeat. You're not thinking anymore. You are being. And being is enough. You feel the intelligence of silence cradle you like a lullaby too old for lyrics. It knows you, not your passwords, not your profile you. The part of you that dreams when everything else goes dark. The part that watches without needing a reason. That rests without earning it. That exists without proving it. You feel it now more fully than ever. You are the quiet you've been seeking. And it has been seeking you too. So lie there, just a little longer. Let the noise fall away like autumn leaves. Let the stillness gather like dew. Let silence be smarter than intelligence. Just for tonight. Just for now. Just for you. Something shifts again, but now it's not within you, it's around you. The silence you've been listening to, swimming in, resting beside, it begins to take on texture, as if it's not just stillness, but language. Not made of words or symbols, but of moments. You start to feel the way silence curves around things, the way it folds gently around your memories, around the thoughts you almost had but let go of, around the emotions you couldn't name but still carried. You realize now silence doesn't erase, it embraces, and in doing so, it reveals. You think back to every important thing anyone's ever told you. The moments that mattered didn't feel loud, they felt still. A parent's hand on your back when you were afraid. The way someone sat beside you when you couldn't speak. The quiet after someone said, "I'm staying." That silence wasn't a lack. It was a presence, an anchor, a promise that they wouldn't fill the space with themselves, that they were willing to share it with you. Your mind floats to the cosmos again, back to that dark canvas embroidered with stars. Out there, between the spinning planets and collapsing suns, silence reigns, not as void but as theatre, a stage vast enough for galaxies to perform without interruption. You feel a strange sense of kinship with that space, because now you're part of it, not because you've left Earth, but because you've finally stopped trying to escape yourself. Silence has this way of showing you what matters. When the noise clears, what remains isn't emptiness, it's essence, like the skeleton of a cathedral revealed after the bells fall quiet, or the way the ocean floor appears more clearly when the waves still. And tonight your thoughts are still. They float like jellyfish in a slow current. No destination, no need, just motion for its own sake. You begin to think differently about intelligence, not as the ability to answer questions quickly, but as the ability to ask better ones, quieter ones that don't demand a reply. What if true intelligence is knowing how to wonder without interrupting the mystery, how to sit with the unknowable and call it friend? You remember that strange, soft theory that the most advanced civilizations might be invisible, not because they're gone, but because they've grown so quiet. Not lost, but complete. What if the measure of a species isn't how loud it can be, but how much stillness it can honour? The thought doesn't scare you. It calms you. It feels like a permission slip from the stars to stop trying so hard, to stop performing understanding and instead just understand. You feel it now, don't you? That understanding doesn't always look like knowing. Sometimes it looks like breathing. Sometimes it looks like waiting. Sometimes it looks like falling asleep with questions still circling your heart like slow comets and loving them enough not to chase them down. You're almost weightless now, not because you've left your body, but because you've released the pressure to carry everything. You don't need to hold all the answers, you just need to hold space. Space for wonder, for presence, for peace. Your body knows what to do. It softens into the mattress like dusk folding into night. Your limbs forget urgency. Your chest moves like a tide you no longer need to monitor. Even your thoughts feel loved. Not because they're brilliant, but because they're yours. They belong, even the unfinished ones, especially the unfinished ones. There's a kind of intelligence in not finishing things, in letting them remain a little open. Like a song that ends on a note you're not supposed to resolve, a question that echoes longer than its answer ever could. That's what silence does. It gives meaning room to breathe. You smile, maybe on the outside, maybe just in your thoughts, because you're not afraid of the silence anymore. You welcome it. You wrap it around you like a blanket made of stars and breath and slow, sacred knowing. You are still. And in that stillness, you're more alive than ever. You wonder, not for the first time, if we've misunderstood intelligence all along. If maybe, somewhere between the test scores and the satellite launches, we forgot something elemental, something that lives in slowness, in breath, in watching the ripple on a still lake instead of trying to measure it. Maybe we thought the universe was asking us to shout when it was actually asking us to listen. You remember how babies listen, not for facts, not for meaning, but for music, for rhythm, for warmth. Their whole bodies tuned to the tones around them, responding with coos and sighs. Before understanding, there is resonance. And maybe, in a way we can't fully grasp, the universe is listening like that, just waiting for us to hum the right frequency back. The thought makes you smile, soft and sleepy, because it means the answers aren't somewhere else. They're not hidden in distant galaxies or behind locked equations. They're here, folded into the quiet between heartbeats, the pause between thoughts, the silence in a room where nothing is happening, and yet everything is. You're reminded of music, not the notes but the rests, those tiny silences that give the song its soul. Without them, it would be noise. With them, it becomes something you can feel in your bones. Maybe silence works like that too. Maybe it doesn't just separate the moments, maybe it holds them, shapes them, gives them meaning. And maybe that's what intelligence really is, not the collection of data, but the shaping of it, the holding of it, the knowing when to say nothing and simply feel. You imagine again those alien minds drifting through gases or light, or something even softer. You see them not racing, not expanding, not exploring, but resting, breathing, dreaming, not because they've given up, but because they've arrived, because there's nothing left to conquer, because they've realized that the deepest truth was always waiting inside the quiet. You shift slightly in your bed, and it feels like the whole planet shifts with you. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically, emotionally, as if by surrendering to the moment, you're aligning yourself with something ancient, something vast, something gentle. You think of monks in silent retreat, of whales singing low songs that span oceans, of trees communicating underground in ways we're only beginning to understand. Silence isn't an absence, it's a form of language, the first language, and maybe the last. You begin to drift, not in space, but in awareness. You remember a dream you once had, vague now, but it had something to do with a light that didn't shine but pulsed, a presence you couldn't see but felt like a song humming in your bones. You didn't need to know what it meant. It was enough to be near it, to be part of it, to feel it unfold. That's what tonight feels like, a dream you don't need to decode. Just inhabit, just trust. Outside your room, the night continues. Somewhere a streetlight flickers, a bird stirs, a wind rustles the leaves. The world is still turning, still talking, but inside the silence has deepened, and it's not empty, it's luminous. You think of libraries, of ancient scrolls tucked into stone walls, of words etched into clay and forgotten for millennia. Those weren't just marks, they were moments, ideas suspended in stillness, waiting to be felt again. Maybe the universe is like that, a great sleeping archive of thought. And when you are quiet enough, soft enough, slow enough, you become the reader. You become the one who hears. You exhale, slow and steady, the kind of breath that doesn't push but invites. And in that breath, you feel a presence, not a being, not a ghost, just a knowing, a stillness with eyes. You don't look at it, you don't name it, but you acknowledge it. Because that's enough. That's everything. And now a memory arrives, unexpected, delicate, a moment from childhood, a field, a sky so wide it made you dizzy, and the strange sacred feeling that you were being watched, but not in fear, in wonder, like the sky itself was curious about you. You haven't thought of that in years, but now it returns, not as memory, but as reminder, that you've always known how to listen. You just needed to remember how. You wonder again about the aliens, the ones that don't speak, don't land, don't leave marks in the sky. Maybe they're not out there at all. Maybe they are silence itself. Maybe every pause, every hush, every breath held in reverence is a kind of contact, a handshake made of stillness. And if that's true, then maybe we've already met them, in dreams, in music, in the spaces where words fall away, in the places where we stop trying to be intelligent and simply allow ourselves to be aware. The quiet around you is full now, heavy but not burdensome. It's the weight of peace, of presence, of meaning that doesn't need to explain itself. You close your eyes if they weren't closed already, not to block out the world, but to better see the one within, the one where silence doesn't mean alone, it means connected, in the deepest, strangest, kindest way. And for just a moment you wonder something extraordinary. What if silence is the native tongue of the cosmos? What if every loud burst, every big bang, every shout of creation was just a clearing of the throat before the long, quiet conversation began? That thought stays with you. It nestles somewhere just behind your breath. Not urgent, not loud, but patient, infinite. A whisper stretched across light years. A lullaby hummed in the language of atoms, And as your awareness softens completely now, you don't disappear. You expand into something vaster than thought, quieter than time, more ancient than memory. You are not lost, you are home. There's something strange about what happens when you let go of language. When words slip away, when even thought grows too slow to keep up with the moment, and all you're left with is feeling. Presence, the rhythm of breath, the thrum of existence without narration. That's where you are now, not asleep, not awake, not analysing, but floating in that space where consciousness becomes a mist rather than a machine. You didn't plan to arrive here. No spaceship, no mission, no checklist of objectives. Just a soft surrender. A decision, perhaps, made deep inside your being to stop trying to name the universe and simply let it be. And in that letting, something unfolds. Not like a flower, not like a map, more like a memory that wasn't yours, a knowing that's older than your species. You feel it, like music with no melody, a sense that somewhere, somehow, something is paying attention. Not with eyes, not with ears, but with being. You breathe in, and the breath feels like moonlight, cool, silent, ancient. You breathe out, and it feels like you're exhaling dust from a star that died before Earth was born. You're not afraid. In fact, you've never felt safer. Because in this silence, this vast velvety hush, you realize that danger belongs to noise, urgency belongs to noise, but peace belongs to stillness. Maybe you've always known that. Maybe silence isn't just smarter than intelligence. Maybe silence is the proof of intelligence maturing, ripening, evolving into something too sacred to shout. The universe is vast. You've heard that phrase before, but you've never felt it the way you do now, because now it's not just distance, it's depth, not just size, but soul. You imagine again those alien beings, if you can even call them that, not with green skin or tentacles, but with consciousness woven into light, into magnetic pulses, into patterns of thought that move like seasons, beings that don't conquer but cradle, who don't travel but tune, who don't speak but shimmer. And for a moment, the image of Earth flickers in your mind, our pale blue dot spinning through the ink. All its signals, its screams, its stories bleeding into the cosmos. What must it sound like from the outside? A child yelling in a library? Or maybe a musician tuning their instrument before the first note? You hope it's the second. Because music, that's what it's always been about, hasn't it? Not just sound, but shape, structure, silence giving rhythm to resonance. Maybe the universe is a kind of orchestra, and we, the newest players, are still learning when to play and when to wait. And waiting is hard for humans especially. You're a species of urgency. You build, you break, you ask, you demand. But here, in this space between words, you feel something different. A kind of cosmic patience, the sense that not everything must be solved. Some things must simply be sat with, held, rocked gently like an unspeakable truth in a cradle of dark matter. You've spent so much time searching through books, through screens, through telescopes and test tubes. But tonight, you find something richer, not a fact, not an answer, but a presence. You don't need to see it. You don't need to prove it, you just feel it. In the way your heartbeat slows, or in the way your thoughts drift like fog instead of fire. In the way you finally stop reaching and start resting. Somewhere in the farthest folds of space there might be civilizations so old they don't remember what war is. Not because they've forgotten, but because they transcended the need for it. Civilizations that no longer build weapons but weave lullabies, that send out no probes, but open their dreams like lanterns and let them drift across the dark. And what if that's what you're receiving tonight? Not a signal, not a message, but a dream, a shared dream, woven not of language or logic, but of silence and stillness and story. You picture a planet with no cities, no roads, just forests that sing when the wind moves through them. Oceans that hum, mountains that glow faintly in response to thought, a place where time doesn't tick, it flows, and the beings there don't age, they evolve, not forward, but inward. And you wonder, are we evolving that way too? Not with faster tech or stronger bones, but with deeper stillness, with the ability to sit in silence and hear what isn't said, to see what can't be shown, to feel without fear. You smile because it's possible, Because right now, lying there, drifting into the soft cosmic hush, you can almost feel the shape of that future inside you. Not loud, not bright, but certain, like a seed. You remember the moments in your life that meant the most, the quiet ones, the hush of snowfall, the pause before a kiss, the warmth of a hand that didn't need to squeeze, just rest gently in yours. Intelligence doesn't live in the noise, it lives in those moments. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the universe has been waiting to see. Not how loud we are, but how still we can become. You inhale again, and the air feels charged with meaning, like every atom is humming a lullaby just for you. You exhale, and it feels like surrender. The good kind. The kind where you're not giving up, but giving in, to wonder, to rest, to the wild, soft knowing that you are part of something too big to grasp and too gentle to ignore. And now a thought arrives, not with urgency, not even with clarity, just with presence. Maybe the universe isn't testing us, maybe it's courting us, with sunsets, with stars, with silence. Maybe it's not waiting for us to prove we're worthy, but waiting for us to become still enough to notice we already are. You rest your hand on your chest, feel the rise and fall, the rhythm of existence, the song of being human, of being here, and you understand finally that intelligence isn't about how much you know, it's about how deeply you notice, how quietly you listen, how gently you live. So you do. You listen. You drift and you become the silence. And the silence becomes you. You're not sure how long it's been since you closed your eyes. Time is slippery here. Stretched, blurred, almost optional. Like it's forgotten to keep score. You're floating again. But this time the drift feels slower. Deeper. Like sinking into layers of meaning that were always there but too quiet to notice before. Your breath is the only thing you can hear. Inhale, like pulling in the scent of rain on dry stone. Exhale, like giving something back. There's no effort, just rhythm, the kind that doesn't need music to be musical. You're not alone. You don't see anyone, you don't hear anyone, but there's a presence here, not watching you, not judging you, just near, like an echo that decided not to return. A hush that wraps around you the way moonlight touches a windowsill, softly, deliberately, without asking permission. And that presence doesn't feel like a being. It feels like an idea, an invitation, a wordless voice that says, there's more. Not more to do, not more to chase, just more to be. And suddenly you realize this might be what intelligence becomes when it outgrows its own ambition. Because what is intelligence, really? We like to think it's what makes us human. The ability to solve problems, build machines, predict storms, send probes to distant moons. But maybe that's just one layer. The adolescent version of knowing, the noisy phase. Maybe real intelligence is quieter, older, wiser. Maybe it's what comes after we've answered all the questions we thought mattered. You remember something now, something small but important. The time you sat beside someone you loved. Nothing needed to be said. No story, no joke, no solution. Just presence. And it was enough. In fact, it was more than enough. It was everything. That memory floats beside you now like a tiny satellite orbiting the space of your awareness. A reminder that meaning isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence that makes the moment sacred. And if that's true, if silence can hold that much, then maybe the universe doesn't whisper because it's hiding. Maybe it whispers because that's how wisdom speaks. You think about all the voices that fill your life. Notifications, news, expectations, instructions, always something to respond to, always some input demanding output. But here in this velvet void, nothing is asked of you. Nothing is expected. You are not a student here, not a scientist, not even a seeker. You're just a witness, and in witnessing, you begin to see things differently. Like that distant star you always thought was just a dot in the sky. Now it feels more like a memory, someone else's memory, as if it's shining not for illumination, but for recollection, for reminding the cosmos that once, somewhere, something beautiful was born. And maybe it still is. You let yourself imagine what intelligence might look like on a planet made of ice and sulfur, orbiting a pulsar that blinks once every 4 seconds. Not carbon-based life. Not warm-blooded or wired for speech. Maybe just magnetic fields dancing in deliberate patterns, conversations made of orientation and oscillation. Would that count as smart? You smile, because of course it would. Intelligence isn't about resemblance. It's about resonance. It's about coherence within context, about harmony between what is felt and what is expressed. And maybe that kind of harmony requires silence, because silence is what happens when something no longer needs to prove itself. You think of the quietest people you've met, the ones who didn't talk much, but when they did, the room leaned in, not because their volume was higher, but because their stillness had weight, like a planet pulling moons into orbit without ever moving. Maybe the universe is like that. Maybe it's not broadcasting because it doesn't need to. Maybe it's waiting for us to become quiet enough to hear what's always been there. You tilt your head slightly, even though you're not sure your body is still with you. Gravity feels theoretical here. Your limbs have become possibilities. Your spine is stardust. But the tilt is real, it's symbolic, a gesture of curiosity, a quiet cosmic and that small shift opens something. A sound. No, not quite. A sense, a temperature, a pattern, like the moment between two waves, the hush before thunder, a realization that doesn't arrive in words but lands with certainty nonetheless. You feel it in your bones, even though you don't have bones anymore. You feel the truth that silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of listening. And suddenly you realize why this feels so familiar. Because you've been here before. Not this exact space, not this dream, but this sensation, the surrender, the softness, the sense of being held by something that doesn't have arms but knows exactly how to comfort. It was there the night you sat on the roof and watched a meteor streak across the sky. It was there the morning you woke up and forgot your name but remembered how the sun felt on your face. It was there when someone forgave you and didn't say a word. Silence is everywhere, not just in outer space but in the spaces between heartbeats, between breaths, between questions and the patience that follows. And maybe that's where the future lives. Not in the next invention, not in faster processors or better rockets, but in the moments when we finally learn how to wait without wanting, how to pause without panic, how to witness without needing to respond. You imagine an alien species, not ancient in years, but ancient in wisdom. Creatures who evolved not by conquering, but by ceasing. Who stopped expanding when they realized that depth was more valuable than breadth. Who built nothing but understanding. They don't visit us. They don't contact us. But not because we aren't worthy, because we're not ready. Not yet. We're still making noise, still filling the void with projections of ourselves, still shouting into the abyss, hoping something shouts back. But the abyss doesn't echo. It listens. And you're starting to listen too. Your mind begins to stretch in a new direction. Not outward. Inward. Not vertically. Not even metaphorically. It stretches like breath. Cyclical. Expanding. Contracting. Becoming its own kind of silence. You're not dreaming anymore. You're dissolving. Into idea. Into invitation. Into that space where the self forgets its name and becomes everything else. And in that space you find a truth. Not a truth you can quote, or write, or teach, but a truth that lives in your bloodstream, that hums in the quietest parts of your memory, that knows your name even when you don't speak it. The truth is this: silence was never empty. It was always full of meaning. It was always full of you, not the noisy you, not the you with plans and regrets, but the real you, the one that listens, the one that lingers, the one that knows deep down that being is enough. You feel your pillow again. You feel the warmth of your bed. You feel your body returning but not rushing, just rejoining the story. You're here, you are whole, you're held, and you carry with you something precious, not a message, not a conclusion, just a feeling, and knowing that the smartest thing the universe ever did was to go quiet, so that we might hear it. Something about tonight feels like the end of a thought, not the end of the world, not even the end of a dream, just the final syllable in a sentence spoken without sound, a hush that completes itself. You feel it in the temperature of the air, just slightly cooler, like the universe has leaned in for one last whisper, but it doesn't speak, not in words, not in signs, just in presence. You breathe in that presence and hold it gently. It doesn't press against your ribs or tangle in your chest, it settles, like ancient snow falling into the creases of your mind, a quiet so rich it almost feels alive. And in that quiet, something shifts, not in space, not in time, it's in you. Because now, after everything, after floating through questions, through concepts, through cosmic lullabies, You feel different. Not smarter, not braver, just tuned. As if something inside you has realigned, clicked into place, not with noise, not with effort, but with awareness. You've always been aware, of course, but tonight, your awareness is softer. It no longer reaches, it receives. You're no longer trying to understand the universe, you're letting the universe show itself, however it wants to. And tonight it shows itself through stillness. You remember the first time you were truly still, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. A moment from years ago, maybe childhood. A time when you sat alone and felt complete, not full, not empty, just there. Like existence itself was enough. No questions, no clocks, no story, just breath, just presence. And that memory drifts back now, slow and gold like honey. And you taste it, not with your tongue, but with your spirit. You didn't know it then, but that was your first conversation with silence. And tonight, you're picking up where you left off. The universe doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, and you're starting to recognize the pattern. You begin to think, what if intelligence isn't a race to answers, but a return to presence? What if all the galaxies, the superclusters, the filaments of matter connecting distant stars? What if all of it is just a map back to stillness? A kind of cosmic breadcrumb trail leading you not outward, but inward. You imagine an alien, not with green skin or large eyes, but made of thought. A being that drifts through magnetic fields the way you drift through dreams. It doesn't build and it doesn't speak, it simply perceives. Its language is gravity, its emotions are wavelengths, and its purpose, not dominance, not progress, just harmony. It doesn't seek to be known, it seeks to know. And now you wonder, could that be us one day? Could we become something that listens more than it speaks, that rests more than it races? Could humanity grow not in size but in softness? Could we learn to walk quietly on the earth and among the stars? You think of the loudest moments in your life, arguments, alarms, applause, they fade quickly, but the quiet ones, the hush of snowfall, the pause before a kiss, the moment after a baby's first cry, those stay with you, not as memories, as markers, anchors, sacred points on your map of meaning. And now the silence around you feels like one of those sacred points, a soft bell that never needed ringing. You aren't trying to fall asleep anymore. You've forgotten about trying. You're simply here. And in that here-ness, you feel a new kind of gravity, not pulling you down, but pulling you in, deeper, gentler, further. There's an idea, whispered only in certain corners of philosophy and physics, that consciousness might not be a side effect of brains, that it might be woven into the fabric of the cosmos itself, that stars might think, that stones might remember, that silence might be sentient. You don't know if it's true, but you don't need it to be. Because the beauty of wonder isn't in proof, it's in permission. Permission to ask, to feel, to open. And you are so open now. Open like a telescope in the dark, waiting for light that left its star before your ancestors walked the earth. Open like a shell waiting for the tide. Open like a question that loves not the answer, but the asking. If silence is smarter than intelligence, it's because it doesn't need to win, it doesn't need to be right, and it simply is, like the moon, like gravity, like forgiveness. You're not alone in this quiet. There are others drifting too, other minds stretched across time zones and timelines, other hearts learning to beat more slowly. You can't see them, but you can feel them, each one like a candle, flickering softly against the wind of the world. You are part of something now, not a movement, not a trend, something older, something quieter, something that doesn't shout, but shines. You lie there wrapped in blankets and breath and the idea that maybe this exact moment, is what evolution feels like when it chooses peace over progress. And you wonder, just briefly, what kind of world we could build if we listened more than we spoke, if we cherished stillness as much as we chase speed, if we taught our children not only how to answer questions, but how to sit with the ones that don't need answering. You smile, barely, not because you're certain, but because you've stopped needing to be. Certainty is loud, wonder is quiet, and tonight you are full of wonder. A warm heaviness begins to spread across your body now, not uncomfortable, but grounding. Like gravity has remembered you exist and decided to hold you a little closer. You let it. Your hands relax, your jaw unclenches, your thoughts unspool, like threads slipping from a spool. You don't try to follow them, you just watch them float. One thought lingers. Maybe silence is what intelligence looks like when it finally feels safe. Safe enough to stop proving, to stop performing, to just be. You exhale, slowly. The kind of exhale that sounds like yes. And that's when you hear it. Not a voice, not a message, just a feeling, like a song you've never heard but somehow remember. It fills the room, not with sound but with sensation. A warmth behind your eyes, a softness in your chest, a presence in your breath. It's the silence again, but this time it feels like home. And you, sleepy voyager, are exactly where you're meant to be. The questions have quieted now. You've wandered far, through galaxies and thoughts, through silence and meaning, through the soft folds of a universe that never needed to raise its voice. And here you are, still, whole, unrushed. Your breath comes slow, like waves on a moonlit shore. Your body has become part of the bed beneath you, the room around you, the night that holds you like a hand underwater. There is nothing left to figure out, nothing pressing, nothing loud, just the soft ache of being alive in a world full of mystery. And for once, that mystery doesn't need solving, it just needs sharing. You listen not for answers, but for presence, not for sound, but for stillness. And in that stillness, something opens, not a door, not a window, just you, and the stars lean in like they've been waiting. Not to tell you something, but to be heard. So tonight, as your eyes begin to close and your mind drifts further from form and time and thought, remember this. You are not lost. You are not late. You are not behind. You are part of something ancient and unfolding, something wordless and something wide, something that holds you gently, endlessly, silently. Sleep well, stargazer. You've listened beautifully.